On number 4, it asks which of the following equations represents the line that is perpendicular to the line y equals 2x minus 3, same equation from number 3, going through the point 2, negative 1, same point as number 3. But on this particular problem, since we're talking about a perpendicular line, we need to remember that perpendicular lines have slopes that are opposite reciprocals of one another. So two things that you have to change about the slope. You have to change its sign. If it's positive, it becomes negative. If it's negative, it becomes positive. And it has to be the reciprocal, which means as a fraction, it needs to be flipped. So the slope of our given line is the number in front of x, since this is in slope-intercept form, and it is 2. So we want our slope to have the opposite sign. So instead of being positive, it's going to be negative. And we want it to be the reciprocal of this fraction. Well, 2 is not a fraction, but as a whole number, we can make it a fraction by simply putting it over 1. So when I flip that fraction, that becomes 1 over 2. So the slope of the line we're going to write the equation of is going to be negative 1/2. Same thing as number 3. You're going to need to use point-slope form since you know a point, 2, negative 1, and the slope, negative 1/2. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So our y1 is the y-coordinate of our point, so it is negative 1. So we would have y minus a negative 1 becomes y plus 1. Our slope is not the 2 this time, it's negative 1/2, the opposite reciprocal of 2. And then x minus our x-coordinate of 2. Again, just like number 3, we're going to distribute to get rid of the parentheses. So we have y plus 1 equals negative 1/2 x, and then a negative times a negative is a positive. The 2 in the denominator and the 2 in the numerator cancel. They just equal 1, and you'd have 1 times 1, which is 1. Now we can get y by itself by subtracting 1 from both sides, and we get y equals negative 1/2 x, and that just is 0, so just negative 1/2 x. So our correct equation is B, y equals negative 1/2 x. Again, you can use your test-taking strategies of just using your answer choices here. Since you know your slope is 2, you know your slope has to be the opposite reciprocal, which is negative 1/2. That gets you down to choice B and choice C. If you put your point in for the x and y of each equation, here we would have negative 1/2 times our x of 2 equals our y of negative 1. Well, negative 1/2 times 2 is negative 1, and negative 1 minus 5 is negative 6. And since negative 1 is not equal to negative 6, I know that's not the correct equation. When I put it into choice B, negative 1 in for y and 2 in for x, I have negative 1 equals negative 1/2 times 2 is negative 1.